being on stage, this kind of stage, but I have a very warm audience, and it's gratifying to see you all again. I should say again, because I suspect I've seen many of you in the hearing room down at 1 Center Street over the years, always being forceful advocates and obviously committed to historic preservation. And preservation is a bit of a theme here in my introduction of Crystal Field, who I will put on in a moment to take us through the great history of this place, of this theater. Just very briefly, as I was coming over here, I was thinking a little bit about the Village and about, I live in the Village. You all, many of you do, many of you care deeply, and all of you care deeply about the Village and its history and its character. And so much of just walking across 10th Street from 6th Avenue, it's palpable what's there, and a lot of it due to the efforts of people in this room and due to the preservation efforts of certainly the Commission, and when I had the privilege of heading it over those years. And when I was doing a little bit of background research about Crystal tonight, and she, of course, is a founder of this esteemed theater. Back in 1971, my research is correct. She is the artistic director and has been since then and continues to be. And early on the awards are phenomenal. We'll hear much about that, 43 Obies. I think maybe one of the most important Obies is the Obie that Crystal won as an actress. And maybe she won't tell you about it, but I'd like to have you all know about that. And so, going back quickly to the landmark issue, the first two locations of this theater were in two very prominent Village landmarks. This building is not presently a landmark. It certainly has many of the characteristics in terms of its cultural contribution, in terms of everything that's been done here, that certainly would warrant consideration. But before moving over here, the Theater for the New York City was at Westbeth, well known to everybody here, and an incubator of the arts, an incubator of theater and art and painting, and Westbeth, an important architectural landmark in its own right, and part of the Village history of creativity and arts and culture. And then, as I understand it, the theater moved for a period of time up to the what was then the Siemens Hotel on the corner of Jane Street and West Street. That too is an individual New York City landmark. It has some great history to it, involving as a hotel on this bustling waterfront for seamen, including and then ultimately became a safe haven for survivors of the Titanic. The hotel itself is, as I said, an individual landmark, and one of its characteristics was it welcomed indigent seamen. Yes, if you could pay, you paid, and if you couldn't pay, come in. And if you needed help and you needed comfort, like the Titanic, the families of the Titanic and those survivors, then it provided that. And I think it's very fitting that the Theater for the New City was in that location, because many of those principles apply to everything that's been done here. The ticket price is just continues to be incredibly reasonable and affordable. That's a term that's on everybody's mind today, is in this city. And I think that connects back to the Jane Street Hotel. And Westbeth, the creativity of Westbeth, the artistic importance certainly carries on here in this location. And it's pretty much entirely because of the leadership of Crystal Field. And I think we're going to hear a lot about what happened in those intervening years. She's seen it all. It's almost 5 decades. She's seen it, she's led it, and she has a great legacy. A landmark for New York City purposes is defined as a special having a special character or special historical or aesthetic interest as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the New York City, the state, or the nation. And this theater certainly fills that bill. It hasn't been, as I said, hasn't been officially done yet, and who knows what leads in the future. We do have a distinguished member of the current de Blasio administration in the House, Arnold Segura. I don't want to put it on him, but he can certainly convey the importance, and I think it doesn't need to be conveyed, of this institution and this theater. So I'm going to, unless I find from my notes that there's anything else I particularly wanted to say, certainly going to recognize my sister Mary. You may ask, why am I here? And I'm retired. I've come out of retirement to do this important evening. My sister Mary is a board member of this organization, Mary Tierney. And she persuaded me, or brought this to my attention, and I was flattered, honored to be asked, and honored to do it. So, Edward Albee said at an event, I believe, in this room, in this theater, if you're here in the Theater for the New York City, you're in the right place. And you are all in the right place, and we're all here to hear Crystal. Thank you very much.
You said everything I was going to say. No, I'll use this. Okay, well, I was just going to say that there's no way in hell that I can really tell you about the Theater for the New City in an hour, which is what I've got. But I am going to show you some interesting things. There are pictures that I know we have. We have thousands of pictures and documents. We have wanted to have an archivist. About 6 years ago, the New York Public Library was offering a possible grant to get an archivist, and you had to choose from a bunch of possible archivists. They had to come to your place and see whether what the weather was like inside your building and whether you could have an archive. We wanted to have an archive downstairs on the lower level, which would be a little library for people to make appointments and come and see what they needed to see about Theater for the New City. We also wanted to make a film that would help with this kind of documentation. And so, but when we applied to the New York Public Library, their answer was, you really want to make a film, you really don't want to do archives, so we're not giving you one. Okay, so we don't have an archivist. So if there's anyone here who has any kind of a connection to an archivist or a grant for an archivist, our archives are all here. They are in file cabinets. We have never thrown anything out. But, you know, when I go to look for pictures, I found 202 pictures right off the bat. We have thousands. And there are many, many, many people and many, many events that I'm not going to mention tonight because I couldn't find them fast. All right. With that said, I'm going to show you a few things. You could turn out the lights. So I'm actually going to start a little bit with this one because this is a picture of a street play by Robert Nichols. He decided that I was going to direct all his street plays. Robert Nichols was an architect, and he was the founder of the Judson Poets Theater out of Judson Church. I don't know if you remember the wonderful Reverend Howard Moody and the Judson Church, which is still going strong today. But Robert Nichols was the one who began it. Began it with a play called Dr. Faustus Lights the Lights. He was a great man and a great writer. Anyway, this was a street theater piece that I did before Theater for the New City. My brother is second to the end. Ann Harris is on the end. That was the Harris. George is second to the end over there, George Bartenieff, and there were other people who followed us to TNC. This was a play called The Expressway. It was against the Robert Moses wanted to build an expressway that would cut the Italian section below Greenwich Village in half. He wanted to connect the West River with the East River. And we fought against it, and we won. He never did it. And the expressway was part of that effort. Okay, so in this play, I drove up Lafayette Street, I'm telling you, because this is really the beginning of the Lower East Side, even though I was not yet connected to Westbeth. We drove up Lafayette Street. I drove up Lafayette Street in a car with 4 dummies sticking out the window and me with a mask, and we smashed the stage, which fell into pieces. Now, we actually opened the public theater. This was the first performance of the public theater. Although it was outside, it was a public theater performance. And the guy from the public theater, Bernie Gersten, said that he was not going to build this because it was a bunch of boxes with sticks in the corners. So Bob, who was an architect, said that he would build it himself, and he did. And you see how many people are on that stage now, running around, and the stage held perfectly, and then it got smashed into pieces at the end of the play. Really, a really nice piece of work. Okay, so that's how, oh, and I come out of Judson Church. I cut my teeth after I was a member of Lincoln Center, and then I got introduced to Judson Church, and that's where I cut my off-Broadway teeth. Okay, next. So then in those days you could lean against a car and talk to somebody. You can't do that now, it'll beep. You could sit on the edge of a building. This was the public theater. And these are 2 members of the audience. We had a very nice sized audience. And okay, next. Okay, so at the time, at Judson, we were doing something called Dracula Sabbat. And it was very, very successful. It was really wonderful. This picture was taken by Max Waldman. And Larry Kornfeld, Theo Barnes, George Bartenieff and myself decided to make our own theater. And so we took with us this production. We did it at Judson, and then we did it at Westbeth. Next. And we came to Westbeth as George, me, and Larry, and Theo you don't see, but he was there. We were at Westbeth through Joan Davidson Foundation. We were granted a 1.5 years rent-free in this building, which had been the sound stage for the jazz singer and had fallen on disuse. They gave us our own building on Bank Street for a 1.5 years rent-free. And we made 3 theaters there. We brought Dracula Sabbat with us, so let's go to the next picture. That was Dracula, okay, and next. All right, as you can see, it was a very interesting and exciting play, and it really was. It was a wonderful piece of work. Okay, next. And we built theaters. That's little Alex. Alex is now a light designer and a puppeteer with the Swedish Cottage in Central Park, and he's a light designer, and that's me with him. Okay, next. And that's me carrying a pipe. We had lots and lots of volunteers. Everywhere we've gone, we live on volunteers, and they do all the work, and they make us happy, and it's a wonderful thing. It's just a wonderful thing. Okay, next. That's little Alex on George's back, talking to a prospective volunteer actor. Next. And there he is playing the flute with the little kid and George. Okay, next. Okay, and we had interviews for all kinds of things, including tech, and this guy's being interviewed. Next. This was all at Westbeth. One of the wonderful shows that we did was Guns, Movies, Jews, Guns, Movies, The Abyss by Arthur Sainer. It was his first play. It was 3.5 hours long. It was just an impossible piece of work with 23 actors. Mel Brooks came to see it, and somebody said to him, because I overheard this, he said, "What are you doing down here?" You know, he said, "Well, you never know where you're going to get a good idea." So they left after the first act. But, okay, next. Oh, and that was, I believe it's The King of the United States with Judd Hirsch, played by Jean-Claude Van Italy, one of America's great writers. Okay, next. And this was an early street theater audience. We did Minding the Store by Robert Nichols. We did all of Robert Nichols' street theater. We loved doing it. And you see, from the very beginning, we always had big audiences. Okay, next. And here's another audience. You see that, isn't that that building on 6th Avenue and 10th Street, the church? Yeah. Okay, next. There's Minding the Store again. Okay, next. And this is Undercover Cop by Robert Nichols. And again, a big audience, wonderful audience. Next. And here's some more street theater. This was Undercover Cop. The lady in the middle is Gabby, that's Tim Robbins' sister. His sisters came to me before he did. And over there is a nephew of mine. Okay, next. Now, at the same time, we went to the East Village. This is what the East Village looked like. Yes, it did, in 1971, 72. Oh, it was a horror story. Anyway, that's Margaret Miller, and she is getting people to come with her to see the street theater, because we started to play all over the place. Okay, next. And this is the East Village, our first audience in the East Village. Next. And here's some more of our first audience in the East Village. Next. And here's another shot of our first foray into the East Village. Now you can see that what we had in the way of backdrop was a piece of cloth. And by the way, the lady in the middle is Barbara Garson. I don't know if you know her work. She's a major writer. I can't remember the name of the play that made her famous, but... McBird. She wrote McBird. And there she is working her ass off in the street theater. Next. We started the Halloween parade. Now, the way this started was that Ralph Lee worked for me for 5 years in the street theater. He made a beautiful backdrop, like a quilt, you know, a patchwork quilt, but it had little places where you could stick your head out and make windows and things, and you will see it in some of the coming pictures. And so, okay, listen, we went into this Siemens, so, okay, first of all, wait a minute. We got thrown out of Westbeth. Now, I'll tell you how that happened. After being there for, I believe it was 1.5 years, oh, first of all, after 6 months, they decided they were going to rent it to a video company, and behind our back, they went to the video company and rented our building. So, but we had a lease for 1.5 years. So, Theo and Larry said, the place of the artist is not in politics, and they left. So it left George and I, and of course we said we were going to sleep there overnight and not allow them to take the building. And of course all the volunteers were there with us, and a couple of nights we did stay overnight. However, we found that we had a lease for 1.5 years, so they really couldn't do anything, and we were there comfortably for 1.5 years. At the end of 1.5 years, Jean-Claude Van Italy, who lived in Westbeth, said to me, I heard at a cocktail party that the NEA is going to give you $12,000. So I went to the head of Westbeth, which was at the time being run by a committee of artists. Now, you know artists know how to run businesses. So, of course, they told me, we don't think you're going to get that money. You just heard that somewhere. And we are going to give it to this video company. And they did, and we moved from West Beth, a couple of blocks away, to Jane Street, to the Jane West Hotel. And we moved our piano, we moved everything by hand, and with volunteers. The Jane West Hotel, at the Jane West Hotel, it was across the street from a bunch of empty warehouses. That was Jane Street at that time. And the trucks were a block away. And I got out on the little porch of the Jane West Hotel and I yelled, "Hello out there," and of course there was no answer. But Ann Harris said, "Don't worry, if you do good work, people will come." And so we started. Now the Jane West Hotel, you had to be over 40 and single to get in there, and it was a welfare hotel. So people were dying on the main steps to the hotel every day, pissing, vomiting, blood, but we got very good at cleaning it up. We could clean it up so fast you wouldn't believe it. And the audience never saw it because they came in by way of the little porch, which was about a half a block down the street, the other end of the building. And so that's what we did. And for all the years we were there, we were constantly, half an hour before the show, though it would be raining from the roof, and we found out that a guy left a pot of rice in the shower, you know, and it overflooded and things like that. So, and one guy who was in a show that we did a play called Morn to Midnight, where the Harris family was in it, and I put him in the last scene, which took place in the Salvation Army, and he was, so I figured he could be part of the audience, which he was in the play, except one day he died, and that was the end of that. So they were taking people away all the time in ambulances. But we got audience, and I mean, we didn't get a little audience, we got huge audiences. Anyway, as far as the Halloween parade goes, it started at Jane Street, it went to West Beth, it wound its way through the West Village, and ended up in Washington Square. We're talking, let's see, wait a minute now. I'm not sure what year, but it was before 1978, anyway, that's for sure. I might know, about 75, yeah. The thing is that we would never have allowed it to get big like it is now, so maybe it's just as well we left. We wanted it to be a neighborhood parade. It started that way, and that's how we would have kept it. And we would have ended in Washington Square. And we asked all the different heads of the different block associations to be our security, and they all did, and we always had just a wonderful time. So what happened was Ralph came to me and he said, "You know that parade you do before each show that we do, each street theater show?" And of course that parade I took from Bread and Puppet, because they always do parades before, and I had known Peter and worked with him, and I took that idea for our street theater. So Ralph said to me, "I've got all these wonderful puppets, huge puppets, in my loft. I have nothing, I don't know what to do with them. Why don't we have a parade? And we could have it on Halloween." So it was his idea. But of course, as you can tell from tonight, if you give me an idea, I'm gonna run with it. And I did. We got a brass band, we got all kinds of other puppets makers, and we had a huge parade with lots and lots of wonderful puppets and masks, and we ran it ourselves for 2 years. During the second year, it won its Obie. And then at the end of the second year, I asked Ralph, because the NEA was giving a grant, and I was going to ask for $1,100 for Ralph to continue. So, but what he did instead was he went to the head of the Block Association on Bank Street. That's who it was, I don't remember her name. But they decided to go to the NEA instead of me. They went by themselves, and they got him $1,800 instead of $1,100. And they told me, "You cannot run this anymore by Theater for the New City. We are now going to run it by committee." Okay, the first year it made the front page of the New York Post. So it was big. But I said, well, okay, you can do that. But we have to have, because I always ran things with George and with a lot of other people. This theater has never, ever been run by me. It's always been a group of people, and the group changes, but it's always been not just myself. We talk, we discuss. My board knows that very well, because that's the kind of board I have. I can actually go to my board with problems, unlike a lot of other boards. So anyway, I said, if we can have, we have to have artistic control, but we don't care whether you run it by committee. And they said, no, you cannot have artistic control. It's going to be artistic control by the committee, which it could include you. And that's when I said goodbye. So that's what happened. And we started, well, that's how it is, because if you want green hats and they want red hats, you can go home. Okay, next picture. Those are some of the pictures from the first Halloween parade. They're hard to see, but if we had an archivist, you could look at them. Okay, next. Okay, that's Robert Patrick. He appeared at, because we started something which we were going to do anyway, which was the Village Halloween Costume Ball, because we had thought that the parade was really for children, and that the adults, once the kids were in bed, should have something nice to go to. And so we started the Village Halloween Costume Ball, and this is one of the first times we did it, and there's Robert Patrick. Okay, next. And we did the work of Harry Katukas, HMK, if you know his work. He's a major West Village personality. He's passed away now, but we did a lot of his plays, and he was a great force in the off-Broadway movement. Of course, he also was a destructive personality. He once threw a stink bomb into a play at the Sheridan Square Theater. Of course, he did other things, but we'll talk about that at another time. Next. This was a play called The 10 Best Martyrs of the World, written by Seymour Simkis, who I think is a great writer, and I've never been able to get the money to do the plays of his that I want to do, but I did this one. It was wonderful. It was 10 rabbis, and in the end, Hadrian offered them martyrdom, and they wouldn't take that either. So he just swept them out the door. But they won a prize from heaven. They were the 10 best martyrs of the year. Okay, next. And of course, Spider-Woman Theater. Yes, they performed. Wonderful American Indian background women, and they're also feminists and great artists. Next. And Remy Charlotte. We did the work of Remy Charlotte. I don't know if you know her. Choreographer, director, wonderful. Next. And here's, we did a concert with Eric Bentley. Eric Bentley did a concert at the theater. This was all in Jane Street. Next. And this is the Angels of Light. They were a group out of San Francisco, but they came to New York, and people used to tap their feet when they thought something was wonderful. They used to rock, the building used to rock when people saw the Angels of Light. Next. Okay, and then we did street theater. So this is Willie Heavy Shoes by Robert Nichols. Next. And we went to Lincoln Center with Willie Heavy Shoes, but we ran a car full of people onto the set because it was part of the play, and the guy there didn't like it, so he never asked us again. But we did very well in that performance. Next. That is a play by Barbara Garson called Dinosaur Door. Now that's Alex on the right. He's growing up. And there's Barbara Garson's kid, the little girl. That's Amlin Gray, who turned out to be a brilliant writer. And up at the top is the body of David Tice. Next. And this here is another picture from Dinosaur Door. And the kid next to the left is Vin Diesel. So you should know that Vin Diesel started with us. His name was Paul Vincent. Next. Well, that's a story. They came in to vandalize the theater one day while I was alone. And I said to them, a bunch of kids, and they said they were a gang and they were going to vandalize the theater, so I convinced them to be in a play instead. Okay, that's George and Dinosaur Door. Next picture, next. And Mabu Mines, they did The Lost Ones at our theater. That made them famous, and then they went from us to the public theater. Next. That was Chile 73. By Mario Fratti. We took that to, along with a play by Arthur Sainer called The Children's Army is Late, to Parma, Italy. We were invited to that festival, and that's Chile 73. Next. And that's Parma. Next. And this is Parma, in Chile 73, at Parma. Next. And that's also about Chile 73. It was about the murder of Allende. Next. They loved us until a priest came on, and they hated the fact that the priest was left-wing, you know. They were talking about abortion at the time, and they booed the priest, but they bravoed the play. So next. And that is Arthur Sainer's The Children's Army is Late, and that's Sarah Brecht on the right. That's Bertolt Brecht's granddaughter. Next. And this is also The Children's Army is Late. Next, at Parma. Now, we did a lot of street theater, and that's me and Tim Robbins. Timmy, when he came to us, he was 13 years old. Next. And there he is in The Little Prince. He was The Little Prince in The Little Prince, and the Harris kids were in that, and as well as Anne, the mother, and it was a production. It was an adaptation of Little Prince by Laurel Essing. We made a musical out of it. It was wonderful. Okay, and there's Timmy again in The Little Prince and there's The Little Prince again. Go, next. And there's the curtain call for The Little Prince. But you can see some of the regulars are there. There's Alan Gray in that jacket, and there's Margaret Miller. So, okay, next. And that, I think, the guy on the right is Bob Schley, and I don't know if he came tonight, but he made a reservation. And the other guy is Jerry Jaffe. There you see Ralph Lee's beautiful backdrop. At least one shot of it, anyway. Okay, that was Undercover Cop. Next. And that's Undercover Cop, and that's Timmy at the end. This gentleman in the middle died of AIDS. He was a brilliant costume designer. He could make costumes so fast. He could work on 2 machines at once. He ended up doing costumes for movies, and he was the head of the costume department at Brooklyn College, and he was a sore loss. Okay, next. And there's Timmy again. This was in Open and Shut Magic Company. Next. You can see Timmy's getting older, and this is Open and Shut Magic Company. Next. Oh, yes. And then, 1976. Bob Nichols moved to Vermont and said he was leaving New York, and he wasn't going to write any more street theater things, and he wanted me to start writing them. Now, 2 years before, he started by giving me scenes to do, or he'd write the first sentence of a scene and I'd have to finish it, or he'd write the first sentence of a song and I'd have to finish it. So I was already, messing around with it, but when he told me, this is it, Crystal, you're on your own, it was real scary. So that's what I did. That was my first street theater piece, really. Mama Liberty's Bicentennial Party. Okay, next. And here are some scenes from it. That's Alvin Alexis on the right. He's a brilliant actor to this day. Next. Oh, you can see Ralph Lee's beautiful backdrop. Okay, that's Jerry Jaffe getting a pie in the face. Next. That's Tim Robbins as Haldeman. There was Haldeman and Ehrlichman at the time. Okay, next. That's also Mama Liberty's Bicentennial Party. Next. And then we did the work of Richard Foreman. We did about 6 plays of Richard Foreman. Richard Foreman, in the beginning, he used to have a string along the bottom part of the stage between him and the audience. And every 10 minutes would sound a loud buzzer, like that. And that was the way he did his shows. But he has improved over the years. He has. He's more accessible now, and he's a great artist, and he was then. This is called Radio Wisdom. Okay, next. And this is a scene from Radio Wisdom. Next. And then we did The Only Good Indian by Mario Fronti. And in order to work on this, I went to live on the Hopi Reservation for 2 weeks. And we traveled through the Navajo Reservation to the Hopi Reservation. And I met, and we had American Indians in the play. And at one point, we had a bunch of women sitting on the floor watching TV, watching a TV show in which cowboys were shooting Indians, and they were killing them. And from the back of the audience, Alec Brown, whose Indian name I have forgotten, shot an arrow that pierced a target on the stage, and at the same time, we had flashpots go off, and the television sets went out. The arrow landed dead center in the target, and we shot a slide of a cracked target onto the target. It was very effective, but I must say, he shot that arrow right across the heads of the audience. And also, you know who else was in that? Nicky Barnes' brother. You know Nicky Barnes, the great drug dealer? Okay, next picture. His brother was not into drugs. And that's also from The Only Good Indian. It was a really interesting piece of work. Go ahead, next. That's a close-up of The Only Good Indian. Okay, next. And then we did Arthur Sater's The Thing Itself. And that's Renata, forgot her last name, but she was in The Thing Itself. Next. And that's the play I got my Obie for. I played a little man. It was called Day Old Bread. And that's George, and that's Arlene Rothline, a great choreographer, dancer, who died very, very young. Should not have, was a mistake. Not drugs, it's not drugs. But that's the way it goes. Anyway, she was wonderful. Next picture. And that's the Obie I got. Okay, next. And then we did something called Village Writers on the Village. And these were the writers that were in it. So there's Harvey Fierstein, oh God, see, I'm gonna forget it. Irene Furness, Helen Duberstein, Harry Katukis, Joan Durant, Ronald Tavel's brother, Harvey Tavel, Ronald Tavel, Hamlin Gray, John Herbert McDowell, and Bob Heide. And they all did, and Ronald Tavel brought me Harvey Fierstein. He said, I have a friend, he's a young man, he's a very interesting young writer, but he wants a commission. So we gave everyone $40. Okay, next picture. And then we moved to 2nd Avenue. So after, I have it written down when we moved, I think it was 1978. You know, we lost our lease. That's it. We lost our lease in Westbeth, we lost our lease after 5 years, the neighborhood began to change. You know, they say on the Lower East Side, you plant a tree and the rent goes up. So, you know, anyway, we had to find a place. And this theater had been the Gate and the Cricket on 2nd Avenue between 10th and 11th. And I had performed in the Cricket Theater to great reviews. And not for me, but for the leading lady, and I had a small part, but I knew that these were good theaters, so they fell on bad days. They became a key club, a porno movie house. There was a murder, and the police closed it for a year, so we got it very cheap. And we started out by paying, the owner was a mafia, his brother was in jail, but he rented to us, and we paid $1,250 a month rent. And we thought that was a steal. But of course the place was a mess. And of course sculptors and painters and artists and actors and dancers all came, and we made 3 theaters there. Okay, next picture. And that's one of the things it was a flyer for the move. Next picture. And we did the plays of Miguel Pinheiro. Now, we had done the plays of Miguel Pinheiro before. This one was called Midnight Moon at the Greasy Spoon. We did Miguel Pinheiro before Short Eyes. I was with Miguel 2 weeks before he died. He'd been shot. He never recovered. But he wrote. He used to sit in our little office on 2nd Avenue and write, as did Irene Fornes. Next picture. And that's Blue Lips, and they were fabulous, yeah. Okay, and Betty Blue Lips was the head. Next. And there was Blue Lips again, and Betty's in the striped jacket, and the next. And that gentleman was deaf, but he could sing. He has passed away a long time ago, but he was a wonderful, wonderful performer. Next. And that, of course, is another member of Blue Lips, who was with us for many years. Is Lissa here? Do you remember? What's his name? Do you remember? What? Lavinia. That's Lavinia. Right. Lavinia Coa. Okay, next picture. And there they are again. That's Blue Lips. Okay, next. That was Peter Schumann. He did many works. He used to come every year with his company, and he's coming again this year. Next. And there he is, that's Peter on the left, one of their shows that they did. Next. And then we did the work of Leonard Melfi. Wonderful, brilliant, brilliant writer. Butterfaces was the first one. We did a number of his plays. Next. And there's a scene from Butterfaces. Sexy, beautiful women. Next. And there she is, she really had the lead. Wonderful actress. Next. And there's Jimmy Camici on the right. Yes. Now, Jimmy Camici, I must just tell you that there's Mark Mercanti at the bottom, I'm on the left. But the thing about Jimmy Camici is he was a force in the gay rights liberation movement. Everything from Stonewall on. He was a poet and an activist poet. And he was a major, major contributor to the inspiration of people who were fighting for the rights of gay people in this city. Okay, next. And that's me. I was in Writer's Opera by Rosalind Drexler, and it won an Obie. Not me, but the play won an Obie. Next. Then I was in a play with Lola Pashalinsky, one of the greats. And it was called The Blonde Lead of the Bottom. It was by Stephen Holt, and I must tell you that Stephen Holt wrote the first play about AIDS. It was called Fever of Unknown Origin, and it is the first play that was written about AIDS by him. Okay, next. Okay, we did all the plays of Maria Irene Fornes. I'm only showing you 1 or 2 pictures. This was Mud. Do you see the costume designer anywhere in there? What was the costume designer's name? Oh, well, that's true. She really was the costume designer. But sometimes, if we didn't have somebody, we'd make up a name, and that would, Richard Ultra McCauley or something. Anyway, no, Gabriel Bury was the real thing, and she was a great costume designer. Anyway, that's Mud. Next. And the Thunderbirds did their powwow, began to do their annual powwow and dance concert at our theater, and they blessed the 2nd Avenue Theater. They were the first to perform there, and they blessed it. Anyway, they still are. We are going to do a powwow this year again. Next. And we did a play with Hollywood Lawn. So the Harris family did this. Okay, next. And we did the early work of Paul Zaloon. I don't know if you know his work. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy, a puppet maker, puppeteer, storyteller, wonderful, wonderful artist. Next. And Peter Schumann directed a version of Othello. And George played Iago, and Margot Lee Sherman played Desdemona. Okay, next.
And your cat walked across the stage when Othello was killing me.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And we did the plays of Joan Shenkar, and that was Adrian Brody's, entrance to theater was in that play. Next. Then we did a play by Arthur Sainer. We did all of Arthur's plays. I directed them all, called Carol in Winter Sunlight, in which we did, the first scene was done outside on 2nd Avenue, and then the audience came in for the rest of the play, which in its day was very innovative. Next. And then we did the best play that Arthur Sainer ever wrote, called After the Baal Shem Tov. It was the play of his career. That's Mary McDonnell, who I discovered. She had beautiful long black hair, and she was a brilliant, brilliant young actress. And when Robert Woodruff came to direct Mary Child, I told him that she had to play Bunny because she was so good. But they made her really go through the hoops. She did about 10 auditions, and they finally did take her for that part, and she was wonderful in that part. But After the Baal Shem Tov was one of the great plays. Next. And then we did Mary Child. We commissioned Mary Child, and we did it here at the theater on 2nd Avenue, and it moved to it wasn't Theatre de Lys, it was the other one. I don't know. It moved off Broadway, and it won a Pulitzer. Yeah, but I did something as usual. I had an agreement with Sam that we would not take any money. We didn't take any money from the proceeds of this play, but that we had to have credit and we had to have artistic control over the move. And so they took everyone. I mean, the producer had to take everyone, including the stage manager. They took the lights from our lobby that they had used in the play. They brought them over to the theater. Everything went with that production, and that's why that production was so good. Because in order to save money, that's what they do. They clip and snip and ruin it, but they didn't ruin this one. Okay, next. And there's Mary McDonnell and Tom Noonan in Mary Child. Next. And that's Mary Child again. Next. And then, Baal Shem Tov, we got people in, we couldn't fit them in the theater. There was so much audience. And so that was for Baal Shem Tov. So the next year, he was going to give me another play. And by the way, his plays got shorter and shorter. He would never let me cut. He would not allow editing. So the first play was 3.5 hours long, but as the years went by, he got smarter, and he cut, and he cut, and he cut, and Baal Shem Tov was a decent size, and then the next play he gave to Lee Brewer. Why did he do it? I don't know, because I think he became famous. And he wanted to give a play to somebody more famous than I. So I asked him, well, what about a play for me? And he gave me the first play he had ever written. And it was a really impossible piece of work. But Margot Lee Sherman was in it, and George Bartenieff was in it, and in this picture they're wonderful, and they were wonderful in the play, but the play was all over the place. And because of that, I never would do another play by Arthur Sainer, and I never did. Never did another play of his.
No, you did one about Shakespeare.
By Arthur?
Yeah, by Arthur Sainer. It was a version of Merchant of Venice.
I don't remember that.
This theater, I remember it.
Really? But I didn't direct it.
No.
No, I never directed another play of his. Oh, I didn't say we wouldn't do another play. I forgive, but I don't forget. I'm Jewish. That's the way it goes. Okay, next. Okay, then we did a big rally, Arts for Life. Yeah, that was a festival for nuclear disarmament. Carly Simon was in it. Oh, everyone, their brother was in this. It was wonderful. Next. And then we did a street theater performance of Keep Truckin', and that actor, whose name I have forgotten,
Michael St. Clair.
Michael St. Clair. He turned out to be a brilliant TV actor, too, and he was just fabulous. But it was a wonderful, wonderful show. Oh, I wrote it, but anyway. So next, and we won an award for it, The Villager. Now, The Villager had gotten better and better and better and better and better. It began to be a really important paper. It had some literary merit, and then they sold it. And that's what happened. So, next. And that's another one for Keep Truckin'. Okay, next. And we won an Obie for the theater. We won a special citation. That's George and me and the Obies. Next. And we did street theater. This is The Time They Turned the Water Off. That's George Harris on the right and Mark in the middle. Next. And there they are, the Colorado sisters, Hortensia and Vera. Brilliant, brilliant actors and activists, and the guy on the right was a parole officer, but a wonderful, wonderful actor too. No, he was a good parole officer. There are good cops, and there are good parole officers. There are good politicians too. You'd be amazed. Okay, next. And here comes, that's the same, the Time They Turned the Water Off. Okay, next. And there were rats in the show, usually the corporations. At that time, I got criticism saying, and Crystal, the audience sat as far away as they could because she was saying, so stupidly, that the corporations were taking over the world. Well, now they don't say that anymore. Next, because they have. That's more street theater. Go next. And that's more street theater. Next. That I started to write these little masturbatory little shows for Halloween, and the audience loved them. And the first one, and everyone got naked in them. And this one was called The Artist in Spite of Himself. And it was about an artist who tried to control his art, but his art wouldn't do anything he said. So that was that. Okay, and then we did another one. Next. Okay, now just go. This is The Triumph of Dyslexia. Population born. Next. Next. Everyone got naked in all these. Okay, keep going. That's Dan Kelly over there in the arms of other people. And there were a lot of wonderful actors in this. And the audience loved them, but I stopped writing them. There was too much work. Halloween became too big, you know, and I didn't have time. Next. And that's the end of The Triumph of Dyslexia. So actually my son had dyslexia, and I really was inspired by that. Next. Okay, and then, so then the rent went, over the years, slowly up to 2,500. And that was all right. And then, all of a sudden, in 1984, I think it was, the rent went to 8,000 a month. He would only give us an 8-year lease. He wouldn't give us a 10-year lease, I remember that. And we couldn't pay it. And we went to court. We went to court without a lawyer. And we won a settlement. And the settlement was that we would keep paying the rent, but we had to get out. We had to get out by September, I think it was. So this wonderful, wonderful guy, whose name I don't remember, but it's in our archives. He was a lawyer who lived on the Lower East Side. He was part of Goals. we try to get a street named after him because he found us a place, and he found us this building. This building had been the First Avenue retail market, and if you look outside, you will see that we have kept those names, that name engraved in the stone outside, and because we think it's a retail market for art. And it fell on difficult times. It was the same kind of thing as the Essex Street Market, and it was closed in 1969, and by the way, this building was built in 1939 to take the pushcarts off the streets by Mayor LaGuardia. And it is a very strong building. It's all steel and concrete, WPA built. Boy, they could build in those days. They could build. Anyway, so we had to get out. Anyway, he found us this place. Now, this place was so unknown to the city. By this time, the Department of Sanitation took it over. They parked their cars here. They had a little bag lunchroom. They had some showers, and they kept all their flyers here. You know, they have many, many announcements and flyers, and they stored them here. But mostly it was empty. The whole basement was totally empty. Okay, however, we got this building. Well, we got this building from a wonderful person who was the commissioner for the Department of Sanitation at the time. I do not remember his name, but he was a theater goer and a great person. Well, they got rid of him because they said for corruption of some kind. What kind, I never knew, and I don't know whether they even knew, but he was out. So when he went out, the new commissioner came in, and of course, the new commissioner said, anything the old commissioner did, I don't want. So of course, we went out with the bathwater. We lost the building. So Harvey Seifter, who was our fundraiser at the time, said, Crystal, you know what, we have to have a rally. So we gotta put pressure on these people, or you're out on the street. So we had a rally, and we called it Arts Alive, and thousands of people came to it. Okay, next picture. There's the rally. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of all kinds of little art, you know, we invited every little theater. In that time, there were many, many little theaters around off Broadway, and they all held the signs of their theaters, and they all came. Now I'm going to show you a whole bunch of people that spoke at the rally. Okay, next. So I don't know who that was. Maybe somebody can remember.
David Garcia.
David Garcia. Who was David Garcia?
St. Mark's Church.
St. Mark's and the Bowery. All right, next. And there's the rally. Next. And there's some more rally. And that's Spalding Gray at the rally. Next. And that's the Spider-Woman Theater at the rally. Next. And that's the rally. Next. People were hanging stuff from and that's the rally. Next. And that's John Vaccaro, the great John Vaccaro, Theater of the Ridiculous, or Ridiculous Theater Company. One of the great artists of our time. Next. And that's Joe Papp at the rally. Next. And that's the rally. Next. And that's Grace Paley at the rally. The brilliant, wonderful short story writer and friend of Theater for the New City. She performed many times here, and at many benefits she did her poetry, her short stories, and Robert Nichols' short stories, poems. She was a great, great friend to this theater. Next. And there's Richard Foreman at the rally. Next. And there's someone who's that? Art Lugo at the rally. Wow, now what was the name of his? The Village Gate. That was when the Voice was the Voice. Yeah, when you didn't have to pay your way in. Okay, next. And that's Phoebe Legere performing at the rally. Next. And that's Irene Forness speaking at the rally. Next. And that's Steve Ben Israel talking at the rally. Next. And that, I think, is Ted Weiss. Yes. Now, what was he? Congressman. He was a great friend to the arts. He was a wonderful, wonderful. Now you see, I once said to one of the people in office, I said to him, you know, you're great, but, you know, I just, the rest of them, they're just all bureaucrats. And he said to me, Crystal, he said, I am a bureaucrat. But he was, some of the bureaucrats were great, great, wonderful people. Okay, next. Okay, and that's Chino Garcia at the rally, next. And that's me at the rally, next. And that is Jerry Nadler at the rally, next. This was some rally. And they were still dancing at the rally, next. And the Thunderbirds performed at the rally, next. And they performed at the rally, next. And that was Ruth Messenger, who was borough president, spoke at the rally. Wonderful, wonderful woman, wonderful. Next. By the way, Gail Brewer is a good, very good borough president, I must say. I'm very... Anyway, we formed a line from 2nd Avenue to 1st Avenue, holding hands, all the way from 2nd Avenue to the new building on 1st Avenue at that rally. Next. And so we got the building. We got the building. So we got the building and we moved by hand from 2nd Avenue to 1st Avenue. You can imagine what kind of a move that was and how many people it took. We did not hire a moving company. That's Mark Marcanti on the right. There's David Dinkins, who was borough president. Wonderful, great man. That's Harvey Seifter. That's Ed Koch. Yay, Ed Koch. A great, great mayor. Wonderful to the arts. I mean, I speak from the point of view of an artist. And that's me, and there's Bess Meyerson. And she was wonderful, too. And they beheaded her for no reason. Well, she had a boyfriend who was no good. Well, her boyfriend is not her. But anyway, never mind. Next picture. And this was the prize. This is what they gave us. There was 3.5 feet of garbage and rat poison in the basement. It was a horror. That was this building. Okay, next picture. Also this building. Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyway, it was murder. Okay, next. Anyway, we cleaned the whole place up. Oh, I mean, I'm talking hundreds of people did this. And then Chico did a mural. That's not Chico, but that's one of his helpers. He made beautiful murals on the 10th Street side of the building, which they thought was going to be all tagged up. Next picture. And next picture. Next picture. That's part of one of his murals. You see his name over there? Next picture. Yeah, he did beautiful work. And let me tell you, the drug dealers that lived across the street, they watched the mural for us. And no one ever tagged this mural. It was all along the whole. When we came, I forgot to tell you, when we came to 2nd Avenue, now I'm going back, we were so used to cleaning up blood and vomit that there was a shooting on 10th Street and 2nd Avenue just before we arrived, and the police had cleaned it all up, but not the blood. So we went out there with buckets of soap and water, and we cleaned it all up, and the neighborhood was shocked, you know, but we were used to doing it. So, okay, next picture. And then we did, for about 8 years, we performed in the 9th Precinct giveaway presents at Christmas. They still do. And we performed for the hundreds of kids out on 5th Street waiting in the cold for their presents. And the next picture that's a picture of some of the kids who waited. Next. Okay, and that's my mother. And the thing about her is, I can just tell you, she came here in 1905. She was an immigrant from Russia. She was a poor. Her father got tuberculosis in a sweatshop. Her mother died of toxemia of pregnancy in the hospital from dirty instruments. She became a doctor. She was an orphan. She became an orphan. She became a doctor, and she's told me so many times that her education was helped by going to cheap and free theater, Eva Le Gallienne's theater and other theaters, and that really helped her to have a cultural, because she couldn't speak English when she came here. And she also told me about immigrants and immigration, and that this country was built on it, and that it's going to continue, and it has to continue. Yeah. Next picture. And that's Irene Furness riding away with Helen the cat. Next picture. And that's one of Irene's play called The Visit, which was very classically done, except that all the men had plaster penises sticking out of their... That was Irene Furness. Okay, next. And we did the work of Eduardo Machado. This is the first play of his we did. And it had film in it. I don't, I'm skipping over a lot of things, but it was directed by David Willinger. Not spelled right, it says Williner. Oh, brother. Okay, anyway, David Willinger, wonderful, wonderful director. Okay, next picture. And that was Crocodile Eyes by Eduardo Machado. Next. And that was Cuba and the Night by Eduardo Machado. Next. And that was a play called Monograms, and it was about a famous woman poet whose name I've forgotten, who was wheelchair bound. And the lead, no, it was not Elizabeth Barrett Brown, no, it was someone else, but somebody else. And it was played by Kitty Lunn, who had the lead, and she is and was wheelchair bound, and gave a brilliant, brilliant performance. So, next picture. And that was Red Channels by Lawrence Holder. We did a number of his plays. Wonderful, wonderful writer. Directed by Rome Neal, a wonderful director who is now artistic director of New Eurekan Poets Cafe. And he did a play here called Julius Caesar in Africa with drums, and it was fabulous. Anyway, that's Rome Neal. Next. And Lawrence Holder. And that's a play by Laurel Hessing called Sketching Utopia about Upton Sinclair. And that's Vicki Lynchon, who was a major part of Theater for the New City for many years. She's now in Paris. That's Michael Vasquez, and on the left is Philip Hackett, who's now on our board. Anyway, it was a great play. Next. And that was The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, adapted by David Willinger, and Tony Greenleaf was in it. It was a great play. Go. Next. And then we did Stop the War. We did so many Stop the Wars. There's been so many wars. This one was for Iraq, and it was against the war in Iraq. Somebody came over to me and said, "Crystal, don't make trouble." Why are you making trouble? Okay, next picture. And we won an Obie for that Stop the War. Okay, next. And that was a play called, that was a street theater piece called War and Peace. Next. Oh, you could see retail. You could see, you see the retail market sign up there? That was, okay, next. That was the audience. So wherever we went, we've had huge audiences for our street theater, and people know what's going on. They just feel very alienated and worried that they're the only one that knows it. And that's why these plays are of value. Next. Okay, and this is Michael David Gordon, who is one of the great actors of today. He works with Irondale Theater Company, and there's Primi Rivera and other people, and this is all street theater. Okay, next. And more street theater. Next. And more street theater, and next. And there's Joe Davies. I don't know if any of you remember him, but this is more street theater. Go. Next. And more street theater. Next. And more street theater. Now, that's my granddaughter, and that's Allison Nolan, little Allison Nolan. That's Joy Linshine's daughter. Okay, next. That was more street theater. Next. And more street theater, that's Mark Marcanti. Next. And that was Craig Mead. I put him in because we all knew and loved him. He died of AIDS. So many wonderful people died of that dread disease. Next. And that's 4th Street Theater. That was an anti-nuke street theater. Next. And then we were the only, this guy's name is Gao Jingzhen, which is not said very well by me, but he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and he only had one play done in the United States of America, and we did it. He came to see the play, and we called him Mr. Gao. Okay, next. And then we did the plays of Romulus Linney. Now, I won't go into how I met Romulus Linney. I met him in a blackout, and that's all I'm going to say. I won't, because I'll be here all night. But anyway, we did many of his plays, and this was, I think, his best one, Heathen Valley. It was great. Okay, next. And that's a play he did later called Git, which went to Norway, went to Oslo. It was the only American company of Ibsen at an Ibsen festival that they would allow.
Peter Gibbs set in North Carolina, in the Smoky Mountains.
Okay. Anyway, it was a wonderfully written play, and we were very proud to, have them ask us for it. Next. Okay, I remember, this is a play by James somebody or other, who's very famous, and I don't remember his name, but that's Sheila Dabney. I don't know if you remember Sheila. She was a brilliant, brilliant actress, and she still is. Okay, next. Okay, and we did a play called Hiroshima, and Yoko Ono did the music, and that's Yoko over there, and that's her. Okay, next. And we did a play, I can't remember the name of it, but Donald Brooks played Hitler in it, and Tony Greenleaf was in it, and it was directed by David Willinger. Next. And that's me and Mayor Bloomberg. I always said Mayor Bloomberg was the best bad mayor we ever had. He was great for the arts. He was wonderful. Anyway, next. Okay, that's John Vaccaro at the Halloween Ball, the Village Halloween Costume Ball. Next. And then we started the Lower East Side Festival of the Arts. And there are a lot of, Phoebe is in that picture there, and Shami Chaikin, Joe Chaikin's sister, is on the left. And I think David Amram is there. That I know the name of that, the lady on the right. Marilyn Sokol, right. And there's Ann Harris, and I don't know how we started that, but I started it with somebody from Lower East Side Inc. She and I together. We decided in those days, before the gentrification of this area, that we wanted to tell the world that the Lower East Side was something more than just drugs. You know, you couldn't go past First Avenue without a dog and a knife. That's what they said in those days, and it was true. But all the artists came here. All the artists were here. Where do artists go? They go where there's a rat and a cockroach, because the rent is cheap. And they make the area livable and wonderful and exciting, and then move in the yippies and the yuppies and the whatevers, and the neighborhood changes, and guess who leaves? The artists, because they can't afford to be here anymore. And that's what's happening to Lower East Side, and we don't want that to happen. We need affordable housing here, and we need places for painters to paint. Next. Okay, that's Quentin Crisp, who is one of the great people in the world. Next. That's Quentin Crisp at one of our benefits with Lissa Mora on the left and Richard West on the right. They actually brought Quentin to us. So, next. And that's the Lower East Side, with David Amram's got the flute, and there's Penny Arcade in the middle. Lissa's down there on the left, I'm somewhere, and Richard somewhere, and we're coming up out of the station at Astor Place. Okay, next. And there we are again with Mama Liberty. That's the Lower East Side Festival of the Arts. Next. And that was Mosshart's wife, what's her name? Kitty Carlisle Hart. And she was a great woman, and she was a great supporter, and she was with the New York State Council on the Arts. And while she was there, they were wonderful. And she came to a number of our benefits, and she supported us. She supported us greatly. Next. And there's Judith Molina at one of at our Lower East Side Festival of the Arts, the outside portion. Yeah. Okay, next. And now there's people I don't even know. Is that Henry Ganzeller or Ganzeller? No, who is that? Schuyler Chapin. He was great. Wasn't he the commissioner of the arts? Yeah, he was a great commissioner. And then over there is Messenger. And who's that on the right? Who? Deborah Glick. She's still great. Yeah, this was the Lower East Side Festival of the Arts. Okay, next. Oh yes, and then we had Who's Afraid of the New Millennium with Tim Robbins and Edward Albee. Next. So there's Tim Robbins and Edward Albee. Next. And there's Betsy von Furstenberg, who has just passed away this year. A great board member, sorely missed, with Edward Albee. Next, at this wonderful, and there's me with Edward Albee. Next. And there's Tim at that same thing, at that wonderful Who's Afraid of the Next Millennium. Next. And then we did the plays of Charles Busch. By the way, we're going to do a new play by Charles Busch this year. Look out for it. It's called Cleopatra or Egypt May. So, okay, next. And that was more plays by Charles Busch. Next. That was Divine Sister by Charles Busch. Next. Divine Sister by Charles Busch. I won't go into the whole Charles Busch thing because that would take another hour. But we have an interesting history with him, how he started. And that, of course, is Bob Heide, who might be here tonight. I don't know, he was coming, and Edward Albee. Next. And that is Marion Seldes with Edward Albee. Next. And those are the Johnson sisters with John Gilman. And the Johnsons have been great patrons of the theater. Seward, you don't see him, but they have been a bulwark for us. Next. And then we went to L'Aquila with a play called The Director Against His Cast. And that's what this, and that's Arthur Abrams playing. And there's Craig and Mark and Jonathan Slaff. Who?
Juan.
Where's Juan? Juan Villegas. Yes. Juan Villegas. Yeah, and, okay, next. And there we are again. That's Michael Vasquez down there. That's Terry Lee King. I think that's Cheryl Gadsden. Yeah. And this is all the same show. Next. It was a great show, and that's Jonathan and me. Next. And we went to L'Aquila, and we got great reviews. Next. And we got more great reviews. Next. And there is La Piccolo Brigata. They were the people that asked us to come, and that gentleman in the middle is the head of that little organization. So, next. And there's the theater we played in. It's a beautiful building. Oh yeah, great place, L'Aquila. You know, it had a terrible earthquake. Okay, next. Oh, and then I did a play called The Piano. That's Mark Hardwick, who wrote Pump Boys and Dinettes and Oil City Symphony. And he worked with me for 5 years. No, for 11 years. He was the composer for the Street Theater. Okay, that's the first picture. Next. And I ended up at the piano. That was the piano. Next. And that was Uncle Wiggily. And that's Clara. On the right is Clara, and that's Christopher on the left, and Craig in the middle. And Clara is now a member of the New York City Ballet. She is in the company. So she grew up in Theater for the New City. Next, what? And Christopher also. He's also. That's right. He's in the New York City Ballet Company. Yeah, great. Next. I don't know. Oh, yeah. Well, we do a tree lighting at Tompkins Square every year, so they thank us every year, so I threw this in. Next. And we won the John Finley Award for by the City College of New York alumni. And so that's an award we won. I just threw that in. Next. Oh, and lastly, not too long ago, we burned the mortgage for this building. So you can show the next, that we literally burned it. And so I was going to say something. Yeah, that's right. But before I say goodbye, I just want to say that they can turn our lights out, you know, they could do a lot of things, but they can't throw us out of here. The only other thing I wanted to do was to introduce to you Viney Burroughs. So Viney is on the board of Theater for the New City. She's a major actress and writer and director. You want to come up?
I don't need it. I don't need it. You know, we've just had brothers and sisters or hermanos y hermanas. I am a person who says in New York City, why aren't we bilingual? In Montreal, they speak English and French. In New York City, we should be speaking and writing and understanding Spanish and English. Well, that's why I said brothers and sisters. We have been, can that get an applause? We have been on a rollicking road down memory lane, thanks to Crystal Field, and also thanks to the Greenwich Village Historical Society for Preservation. Did I get it right? Thank you for recognizing what Crystal Field has done with Theater for the New City. And because this is an evening dedicated in a sense to memory and respect and love, I thought I would share with you an African folktale. You know, they say that life, human life, as we know it, began in East Africa. So I thought to myself, why don't I share with all of you tonight an African folktale that for me says something about memory and remembrance. So pretend that you are sitting around a fire, not the television. You're sitting around the fire, and your grandmother is telling you a story. And I am the griot in African tradition, who knows the history of the people. Now, like all storytellers, I'm very jealous of the attention that you pay me. So ever so often I will say, Pa! And every time I say, Pa, I want you to say, Pe. And that way I know you are listening to me. Pa! Pe. Near the edge of the Liberian rainforest, on a hill overlooking the Kabali River, lay the village of Kundi, and its rice and cassava fields spread in all directions, and men and boys fished in the river with nets, and the women pounded grain in wooden mortars in front of their homes. Now in this village, there lived a hunter by the name of Ogalusa, with his wife and many children. And one day, Ogalusa took his weapons down from the hall, from the wall of his home, and he went out for the hunt. And the next day came, Ogalusa did not return, and a week passed, Ogalusa did not return. Several weeks passed, and after a while, nobody talked about Ogalusa's disappearance. And then one day, a baby was born to Ogalusa's wife, and the baby was named Puli. And Puli walked, and the first words that Puli said were, "Where is my father?" And the sons looked at one another, and they said, "Yes, where is our father? He left, and he has not returned." And so another son said, "Let's go search for him." And so they all got their weapons down from the wall of their home, and they went out the back, across the rice fields, into the forest, and there in the forest, they followed the trail. And sometimes they would lose the trail, and another son would find the trail, until eventually they came to a clearing in the forest. And in that clearing, lay the bones of Ogalusa. And they knew then that their father had been killed in the hunt. So they stood around looking, and one son said, "I know how to put a person's bones together." And he bent forward, and he put the bones, the neck bone connected to the shoulder bone, and the shoulder bone connected to the arm bone, and the arm bone connected to the, and so on. So the bones were put together. And another son said, "I know how to cover those bones with muscle and flesh." And he leaned forward, and he covered the bones with muscle and flesh. And another son said, "I know how to make him breathe." And he blew. "Will you blow?" And they looked. Ogalusa's chest was rising and falling. And then another son said, "I can make the blood flow through his veins." And another son said, "I can give him the power of speech." Ha! And Ogalusa spoke. Ogalusa stood up and said, "Where are my weapons?" And they picked up his rusted weapons from the grass and gave them to the father. And then they all went back through the forest, across the rice field, until they came to the home of Ogalusa. And Ogalusa's wife came out, and she embraced him. And she brought him into the house. She sat him down. And she brought water for him. And he drank. And he said, "I want to sit here for 5 days." And then, on the 5th day, he shaved off all the hair on his head, because this is what people do when they come back from the dead. And then the people of the village said, "We should celebrate Ogalusa's return." And so they chose one Saturday night, and there was a big festival, and people, the women made all the fine cooking, and they drank palm wine, and the drummers came, and they drummed, and they danced, and they sang, "Ogalusa sahabihe, Ogalusa sahabihe. Ogalusa, 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 Sabihe." And then, in the midst of the festivity, Ogalusa waved his hand, and everybody was quiet. And he said, many months ago, I went out and I was killed by a lion in the hunt. My sons brought me back from the land of the dead. I shall give the son who did the most to bring me back this cow-tail switch. And then people said and began to argue who deserved to get the cow-tail switch. And Ogalusa listened and finally said, as you have said, some son put my bones together, some made the blood flow through my veins, some gave me the power of breath, some gave me the power of speech. But one son did the most to bring me back. And then he went and he bowed low in front of the little boy, Pooh. This son did the most to bring me back. And then they remembered. The child's first words had been, where is my father? And then the people remembered, as they do traditionally throughout Africa. No person is ever truly dead until that person is forgotten. This is my story. I bring to you. Will not be forgotten. And we know through the efforts of the Greenwich Village Society for Historical Preservation that much of the history of the peoples and the communities of this area will not be forgotten. Thank you.